other slides. All right, we're going to kick this off, and I'm going to warn everybody beforehand, after we do the basic part of the presentation, this is a interactive exercise, so if you don't feel like talking to each other, you may want to go up in the other room and talk to each other instead. This is a presentation. James Beal, and I've got a slide later to introduce myself. This is my coworker, John, and we gave this presentation a couple weeks ago at B-Sides, Iowa, so if you saw that, is that better? Here, let me take it out so you can actually hear me. So we gave this, John and I gave this presentation a couple weeks ago at B-Sides, Iowa. I think we had about 40-some people, maybe almost 50 in the room, and everybody had a really good time. We did a full 2-hour workshop. We're going to cut that down a little bit, so if you're not used to me talking fast, you'll hear me talk just as fast as I normally do. Big deal with this. This is this presentation. We wanted to note that this is standing on the shoulders of giants. There are several people out here that have done presentation. Leslie Carhart, or as she's known all across the world on Twitter as Hacks for Pancakes, actually created a version of this that she did as a 4-hour workshop tied into incident response with some of this activity in it at Circle CityCon, which is the conference coming up here in a couple weeks in Indianapolis, and actually had some basic elements here that we played off of and added our own flavor to. And then John is going to speak to it, but there is NIST documentation that's put out that also ties into doing tabletops in your company and why you should do them, and so we decided to make this the entertaining part. So the quick schedule, welcome and intros, and I'm going to do an introduction to the idea and the technical reasons. John's going to talk about NIST pieces because that is what he does for a living. We'll cover any real quick questions over that material. And then we're going to interact with each other by getting into groups of 6 and throwing out some dice and actually rolling some dice. So if you've never played D&D, the picture you see up there is a D20. It's extremely hard to understand. There's 20 sides to it, and there's numbers 1 through 20 on it. And there's some other size dice we're going to use as well. And then we'll go through the scenario, and then the hot wash is kind of the scenario walkthrough. We'll do that real quick tonight. We did a little longer one at B-Sides. And then John has a little survey he put together because he's actually given some other presentations around on the data. And then any final questions. So the basic objectives, benefits of tabletop exercises, why you should do them. You should be doing them, as I have the question there. And I will say this again later. I do hope all of you in your companies, if you are on the blue team and not on the red team as a pen tester, better have an incident response plan. It'd be even better if you'd write it down and put it somewhere. Those of us with auditors actually have to prove that. It's called evidence, and so you may have to do that, and so it's a good idea to have one. And this is a perfect excuse and a fun way to actually test that exercise. We do quarterly tabletops. John started with those at our company about 2 years ago, and I've kind of taken over from there, presenting them and running them. But it's a perfect way to test your incident response plan and make sure that the infrastructure team isn't blindsided by something. And as I said, this is a good way to manage your organization's incident response plans and process. And then we're just going to do a quick debrief, or this is a good way to then turn around and do a debrief with people, do a lesson learned exercise, and then the whole point of us doing this is because this is way more fun than a dry tabletop exercise where you get to talk about ransomware and when your CEO gets to learn that Bitcoin is a thing and why you shouldn't buy Bitcoin because it funds terrorism. The two presenters, I'm James, Senior Security Engineer at FHL BDM. I work on endpoint protection, network security monitoring. I'm the threat intel guy and will work with vulnerability management as well as being our primary incident responder, and that's my Twitter handle. And I'll let John introduce himself.
Thanks, James. My name is John Notch, and I'm actually able to speak tonight. I was not able to speak at the B-Sides presentation, so I look forward to speaking and actually you understanding what I'm saying tonight. I'm also a senior security engineer at Federal Home Loan Bank, work with James and some other guys here. I focus a lot on the cyber risk management as well as, like James said, work a lot on the incident response side. That's part of my passion is figuring reverse engineering stuff and really like to spend my time on the detect, eradicate, and recover pieces. So if you have time, I will talk your ear off on all things NIST 861 and 884.
All right, I'll take back over again for a minute. So incident response. Once again, do you have a plan? We call ours the massively creative Security Incident Response Plan, or SIRP. We also have a crisis management team at our company. This is all of the senior execs, the head of legal, the head of HR, the head of all the departments, so communications is in there, any PR methods, that type of thing. This is actually a completely other team. So the Security Incident Response Plan covers what we do from a technical perspective, and you want one of those. If that includes stuff where you're working with the senior execs, that's fine. We actually have one where our CISO is the bridge. So our CISO, as the primary incident responder, we're handling the technical pieces, but we report up to our CISO, and she is also on the crisis management team and hands off to those. So that's kind of our format, just so somebody has an idea of how it works. What you should have in your incident response plan, some contact info for your team. Nothing happens at 10:30 in the morning on a Wednesday. When you have an incident, 99.9% of the time, you get to find out at 3 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, at which point you do not want to make sure one of your coworkers forgot to give you their contact information and they are the only person with admin rights into the email system or other things like that. This does include infrastructure as well, and anyone else at the company that you need contacts for. For us, we have an MSSP, so we have contact info for them. They are actually our first line SOC, and then they escalate to several engineers on our team. So we have contact info listed with them, and then we have our cyber insurance provider as well. In that plan, we also cover business continuity. We've got crisis management data and some disaster recovery plans. And then we have some basic reference in there of the level of IR activity we might have. So if it's basic and it's just turning around and talking about email, we've got some basic ideas on who's responsible for that. That includes our help desk and the infrastructure teams, or all the way up to a major incident where we're working directly with the crisis management team as well. Here's a big one. If you have a plan, have you ever actually discussed any kind of incident response activity with your team? So even on your own team, do you know who's actually knowledgeable about these activities? Who used to be a backup system admin? Who used to be an exchange admin? Who used to work on the help desk and has managed the help desk and knows how to coordinate and work with that? That it covers both technical and management level discussions, so you need to make sure everyone's on the same page. And like I said here, it covers disaster recovery, incident response, backups, and actually using those backups as a hint, doing massive amounts of backups at one time. If you need to recover from 300 servers, I don't care if you're virtual or you're physical, that is going to take more than 4 hours. And then, do you have any ability to gather evidence or anything to, show evidence of the malicious activity? Can you get virtual disk info, can you get disk info, whether that's virtual or off physical servers? Can you capture machine snapshots? Here's a big one. Is your response to internet malicious activity, we hit the switch on we hit the power switch on the main switches, getting in and out of the company, or do you actually allow the attacker to roam around inside? Hopefully your plan is better than turning, the main Cisco switches off. And then if you've had those discussions, have you considered how you validate actually doing this? So we are escalating our tabletops inside the company. John has run several, and we're moving on to an actual physical component. So we're going to have our infrastructure team build out a virtual environment that they've backed up several times that includes database servers, an AD environment, some workstations, some other random file servers, and then actually perform that activity in one of our tabletops here coming up. So it's a good way to test it, and then you can escalate this as far as you want to. And then this is literally why we do tabletops. So this is how you have these real detailed conversations with everyone at work. It's a good, fun way to do it. The tabletops are actually, a good interactive way to get on the page with actual team members on the infrastructure team, their managers. If you do have an executive one, our CISO ran one this year, and we had some very good discussion in there about activity and how the company would respond and how the execs feel about certain responses and behavior. And then, this is just literally pick a general topic, ransomware, lateral movement inside the company, spear phishing, and then talk about your actual time frame around it all. So this scenario, we're going to do 45 minutes or an hour probably. You can do tabletops for 3 to 4 hours. The one we're planning to do with the virtual lab with the infrastructure team, we're probably going to do 3 to 4 hours with them and see how far they can get. They think it's a simple lab and they think recovery is a simple matter. It may take a half hour. It may take 6 hours to get back to normal. And then this is this activity itself, as we did at B-Sides. John and I want to put this out there. It's open for everybody. Happy to talk to you about it. This is a basic template you can use. You can take the D&D portions out and actually just use it, or you could turn around and do this with your team and actually have some fun doing it. And then I'll hand it off to John for the NIST pieces.
All right, thanks, James. I want to talk a little bit before jumping into NIST, and this will just take 2 minutes. What we call the power, the art of the tabletop is that, management is really not going to understand the technical details and actually how to respond to a scenario like ransomware or business email compromise or any sort of intrusion of some sort. And so it's the nice thing about a tabletop, it's a very generic way to get all stakeholders together at the table and talking through a scenario, and then all of a sudden, oh wow, I don't think we have a crisis management plan, or we don't have necessarily the skills in house to do forensics analysis or exam. And so it's not the technical folks, the incident responders, the blue team that are actually just making the stuff up. It's actually a real scenarios. As you talk through a hypothetical scenario, the executive teams understand it in a very plain language way. And so, just a quick shout out to John Halbrook. That's who was a mentor of mine, and he got me doing tabletop exercises 5 or 6 years ago as part of a larger community response plan to just disaster recoveries. And we're really bringing it to the cybersecurity realm is a relatively new concept. And so I just wanted to kind of talk about a couple resources that I've used in the past. It basically is NIST, and just a quick interesting fact about NIST is it was created by an act of Congress in 1901, but really it wasn't until 1977 when NIST issued the first publicly available encryption standard, DES, which was obviously developed by IBM, that NIST actually started becoming a central authority for the U.S. on all things computer security. And so, for 40 years now, NIST has actually been kind of the U.S. authority on all things cybersecurity, and most from a public policy perspective, most of the executive orders that have happened in the last several years from both President Trump and President Obama are all generated from NIST. And so, just a couple quick notes on this. Some 861 basics really talks about having checklists. Actually, I'm going to talk about the life cycle of handling an incident really quick. Obviously, preparing for an incident, doing these tabletop exercises, and planning for an incident to happen is kind of the key there. Detection and analysis, that's kind of a separate phase of when you detect an incident. Then the real fun happens in the containment, eradication, recovery. And so that's kind of the first three, preparing, detection, analysis, are kind of more management focused, but then it kind of leads in the technical focus of actually how to contain an incident. And then, of course, after an incident has happened and you've recovered, really kind of the power of an after-action report, doing some debriefings and lessons learned. And we're going to actually simulate that tonight. And then also kind of coming away with an improvement plan so that the next time you do a tabletop exercise, you haven't lost the lessons learned from the previous one. And so 861 actually calls a lot on 884, which again is several hundred pages of fun reading. But basically the concepts and the takeaways from 884 there's three concepts: training, testing, and exercising. So obviously exercising, we're going to do a simulation of that tonight, but exercising isn't really designed to be done once a quarter or once a year and just as a checkbox. It's supposed to really demonstrate your weaknesses or places where, like James has said, from a critical IT infrastructure perspective, if you're assuming that your backups are working, and that's an assumption that you're taking away in your exercise, between exercises, you need to be testing those. So if the assumption is that you can recover one server or 300 servers from 4 hours ago, well, that's actually something that you need to take away and test between exercises. And also something really important, and it took a while for me to understand why this was important, is actually training everybody on their roles during an incident and actually rehearsing it. And so that during the first 10 to 20 minutes to up to 4 hours of an incident, we're not just scrambling, looking, like James said, for telephones at 3 in the morning, or we have an actual checklist and we have a plan in place on how we respond, and more importantly, an escalation plan so that we as technical folks understand how to talk to the management folks, and hopefully, everything that we prepared for kicks in and we can minimize the impact of an incident. But really, 884 talks about 2 plan types: an actual contingency plan, which is really more geared toward IT, and then an actual incident response plan, which is geared more toward the cybersecurity element. So I think we're actually ready to start on the exercise. And so do you want to take this one, James? Or?
Sure. Yep. All right, so as I said, you have to talk to each other. So at B-Sides, we had everybody number off, but everybody's sitting close to people. Is everybody comfortable just moving in and getting into a group of 6 people? Or does everybody have to count? This is your chance. Get up, move. We need you in groups of 6. Yep. Yep.
It would probably be a good idea to sit in a good full view of the slide in the presentation, because that's really what's going to drive a lot of the exercise.
And if you're already here with a group of 5 and you want to do a group of 5, that's fine, but you're going to miss out on one of the rolls. And once you're seated in a group, John's going to hand you some dice. And as a side fact, while everyone's getting their tables together, I just want to remind you, I made all of you sit and talk to each other while I stood up on this stage, so I didn't have to. Another side note, we will need someone that's able to take a little bit of notes for the dice rolls. So if you have paper and a pen and are old enough to know what those are, please use those. Otherwise, feel free to note this down on your phone, but every team needs to have at least one person that's going to roll some dice, so you need to be prepared to keep some notes on those dice, because the entire scenario is tied to the responses you get from the dice. Yeah, every table, there's 20 sets of dice, so if we've got less than 10 tables, everybody can have at least 2. And if you've never seen them before, be amazed. There's dice that aren't just 6-sided. All right, everybody in a group that's playing? Looks like it. Everybody good? All right. So to kick this off, here's how this is going to go. Each person on the team, in a minute, we're going to have you roll a 6-sided dice to pick your roll. If you roll the same number as someone else, roll again until we get all 6 members of the team picked out with rolls. This is the fun part with the roll. This is your chance to role play. One of those is the legal team. One of those is the CEO. We joked around in the B-Sides thing a little bit once we'd done it already, but feel free to play your role. So as you notice, my Twitter handle is chaotic neutral. If you don't know what that means, it means I do what's good for myself over everything else. It's a joke, but it's a role in D&D. So you can play the CEO as a, stodgy older gentleman that doesn't feel like he understands what technology is. You can play the CEO role as a 23-year-old female that got promoted up and has started her own company. You can play the legal department. Like we all know, everyone in legal is super reasonable. And they're willing to look past small technical and legal details. So please feel free to ham it up on your team. If you know people, it's way more fun to be a jerk. If you don't know people, it's way, way, way more fun to be a jerk. So everybody should have at least one set of dice, if not two. You can designate one person to do the rolling. You guys can take turns. The only big one where everyone will need to roll is next. So here is your player roll. So everybody on the team start grabbing a couple six-sided die, and whoever wants to start rolls, and whatever number you get is the roll you take. So if you get a 1, you're management. If you're 2, you're blue team. 3 is red team. 4 is incident handler, etc. So everybody take a minute, roll your dice, and somebody at the table raise their hand when you've all done. And write this down so you know what kind of jerk to be. The D6 is a 6-sided one. It's the one that looks like a regular dice. Nobody start rolling for dollar bills either. That's not what we're here for. And John's walking around. If somebody has a question and doesn't just want to yell at me, he'll be happy to answer them. Some of these that have multiple choices, you can choose. You can choose to be the outside forensics team. You can choose to be outside incident response, or you can choose to be the legal team. Yep. 2's internal blue team. 3, you get to be those evil pen testers. Anybody still rolling? Anybody? You guys done? Everybody good? All right. I'm moving on to dice roll 2. All right. Number 2 is a D6 as well. You only need to roll this one time. This is the organization everybody belongs to. So whatever you rolled, write this down because there's some details that are necessary. If you get 2, you're a hospital and you need to roll the D20, the one with 20 on it, for the number of clinics that you have. And if you get number 5, you need to do a D20 dice roll for the number of data centers you have to support. No, everyone said they were done. Nope, here's your player list. Oh no, number 5. You have to be the PR person. All right. Everybody good? You guys good with this one? You guys good? 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 You guys got this one? Ryan, you good? All right. I'm moving on. Everybody ready? This is interactive, otherwise you got to listen to me talk. Aren't you sick of that already? Yep. All right, here's the company details. This is where this gets really complicated with Arden's middle school math comment. First step, take the D20 and roll it. Times that by 1,000 for the number of employees you have to support. If you get less than or equal to 5, multiply it by 100 instead. After you've done that, move on to step 2. The instructions are pretty simple. Essentially, if for step 2, roll the D20 again. As long as you get less than a 15, you're good. If you get higher than a 15 or higher for step 2, when we pick incidents, you get to handle 2 at a time. Double the fun. Double mint. And then number 3. There's a D12 dice on there. Once again, it's the dice with 12 numbers on it. Yep. And roll the D12, and that's the number of weeks or days it took for you to realize the incident happened. If you get a 7, it's weeks. Or excuse me, if it's higher, if you get a 7, it's days, excuse me. Under 6 or equal, it's weeks. This is how long you took to find it. If you haven't heard me say it in the news, the normal outage now is 55 to 75 days before it's discovered, so I'm being nice. If you know anything about D&D as the Dungeon Master role, of course it's my job to be super nice all the time to everyone. I consider your feelings, I just don't consider them valid. All right, everybody good? You guys got all 3? Anybody still rolling? I'm moving on. All right, step 4 and 5. Another D20. This is the number of sites you have. If you get a 15 or above, you are now an international organization. And I don't care if you rolled 5 employees, you're still an international organization. And that is the number of countries where you have offices. And then the D8 for the number of subsidiaries owned. The best part about this one is every single one of the subsidiaries has unrestricted access to your internal prod network. This makes conversation more fun. Guys, find the 8. The D8 looks like a diamond. A 3D diamond, by the way. Not the white wedding ring kind. If you rolled a 9 on a D8, we may have to have a discussion. Everybody good? Yep. Make sure you keep notes on this so everybody remembers. Otherwise, you're going to have a real fun discussion talking about something you don't remember. All right. Those guys look good. You guys good now? You guys good? You guys are all good over here? Ryan, you guys good? All right, moving on. We're moving into the more fun part. All right, here's the scenario. So somebody at the table roll a D6 again. And these are the scenarios you have to face. So, you're going to get mad at somebody, you get mad at whoever rolls this and gets a bad one. Yep. And there's multiple options here. You guys can decide. So if you roll 1, you can do a rogue installer of malware, or you can do IP theft. If you get a 2, you can do an accidental installer, aka someone clicked on a fish, or other IP theft. If you get 4, you can pick collusion or accounting fraud. Number 5, for the external actor, that means the FBI notified you this happened, you didn't pick up on it. So hopefully everybody got a 5, because it's way more fun when the FBI tells you you failed instead of you figuring it out yourself. Everybody good with this one? Good? I'm moving on. All right, that is it for the dice rolls now. So make sure you talk to each other. This is the talking to each other part, not the playing with the dice part. All right. John, do you want to come up and do this? John likes to do the rules, mainly because he looks way more like a cop than I do.
Rules of engagement. So usually, again, this is a simulation and an exercise, and so it's not a live fire exercise, and so typically you'd hold this in like a big conference room or community room somewhere, but the idea is that as you perhaps as the facilitator or the exercise coordinator, you are basically making sure that the exercise conditions apply when the exercise, say, start and end. And so anything that you simulate, like calling the FBI or calling the service desk or calling, calling the CEO saying we have a compromise, you don't actually want to do that. And so really that's the basic rules of engagement. You can and see how fast that is successful and if you have a job the next day. But really the point is just to control the communications, and usually the facilitator is escalating, so to speak, we're escalating out to this particular department or this particular management group. And so one of the things that we're thinking about in our upcoming tabletop is having the exercise facilitator actually go out to our infrastructure group saying, hey, this is a simulation. We need you to restore these 3 servers. Go. And then 4 hours later, we regroup and determine whether or not the backup or recovery was successful. So.
And if you're smart, instead of letting me do it, you have an adult do that. All right. So this is the interactive part. As we said, we're going to go through 6 questions. 3 of them are management style questions. We're going to start with one of those, and then we're going to move into some technical discussions as well. We'll probably do, based on the time frame, we've got about 45 minutes to an hour, so we'll probably do 5 to 6 minutes, and then I'll quickly interrupt you guys for movement to the next question. And then we have a little surprise there in the middle. Kind of ruined it by telling you there's a surprise in the middle. But this is the first discussion point, so now take your role. Take your scenario, take everything you just determined, and actually have a conversation with each other like you're that person on the team. Like a lot of this, you either know some of the people you're sitting with or you don't. There's a good chance if you work for an anywhere near larger company, you don't know half the people at the exercise table anyway. Or if you don't, you should. So this is a good opportunity to meet and greet everybody. But this would be the first question. So management question number 1 to start. You know what your scenario is, you know what your actors are, you know what the whole deal is to start with. In your opinion, based on the organization you are, would you consider this activity to be an actual incident? The answer to that's usually yes, but then you need to determine how you think about that, and please discuss that with each other based on your roles. And then if so, which policies do you think this would violate? So normally you're going to be doing this inside your own company and aware of your own policies. Here, this is a fake fun scenario, so just decide. Decide if you guys have a policy against, phishing, and this is a phishing thing, and your policy says the minute you fall for a phishing, the person gets fired, so everyone in the room gets to vote who gets to walk the person out the door. Or anything else that's fun. So this is supposed to be fun and entertaining for you guys. So go, and I'll bug you in 5 or 6, 7 minutes.
These questions are actually taken from NIST, and so also think about this question in terms of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act as well.
I'm just going to hang the mic up. Yep. All right, it's my turn to interrupt. Everybody good with that one? Get some good discussion going? You guys still going? You can keep up with this question, but we're going to add the first technical question. So, because we decided it was probably an incident, what indicators of the incident might you actually be able to detect? So, once again, this is fake. It's fun. So, you can make it up. You can decide you have enough money to have a full-on functional sim. You can decide you're running on a barely workable bunch of open source software that doesn't talk to each other, whatever you want. And then which indicators would cause someone to think that an incident might have occurred? This is more from the technical team side, more of a build-up as we all know from the tech side. So we'll do another 5-7 minutes. this one? Want to do this one? Yep. Another 20, 30 seconds.
Looking like they're having a good time.
Yeah. I think it's a great opportunity for everybody to talk through. Make up crazy stuff. You're good. All right.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next question. And this is, again, more geared from a management perspective. To which people and groups would you report the incident? And so I guess more generically, how would you escalate it from the point you're at now? Who would be the next person you would contact? And maybe think about what is the message you're going to relay. So like in our example, we would escalate to our CISO, and then she would escalate up. But perhaps in a bank, you may consider legal. So maybe talk about who in your organization or how you might do that escalation path. Oops, sorry. Another consideration would be not only escalating up, but how might you escalate across to your peers within your organization or potential in your industry? So if you're a hospital in Des Moines, who might you share? Would you share information with another hospital, like an indicator? So.
All right, I'm going to interrupt everybody. That's been about 7 minutes. Now we're going to step it up a notch. So somebody grab some dice. Oh, nope. This is a technical question. Excuse me. How would the incident response team analyze and validate the incident, and what personnel would be involved in the analysis and validation process? We'll cover this one in just a couple minutes, and then we'll move on to the injects portion, which is the next piece of it. We'll just do quick 3-4 minutes. So I forgot to mention this earlier. One of the dice in your pack is a percent die, so it's got 0, 0, 10, 20 on it. One of the guys back there brought that up about rolling. So if you want to inject a little bit of fun randomness in, you could roll that percent die to determine how actual, responsive people are, how your actual detection level is. So if you roll the die and get a 90, you can do the 90%, effective. If you get a 10, or as those guys just got, a 0, then you've got to turn around and determine if your detection was 0% effective and your validation is way off, then how that would affect everything. We'll go for about another minute or two, and then I'll jump in next.
long as your primary incident handler been up.
Yeah.
Energy drinks. Oh, that'd be an awesome time roll.
Oh, we've got part of that covered in the injects next, so that'll be the interesting part. But yeah, no, we can easily add stuff like that to it.
I can't remember his name. I think he works now for X Team, but he was the main incident handler for
I don't know that I've heard that story.
I went out to Embassy Club. I think Austin put it on last year. And being Christian, I think it was like early 2017. Guy, a gentleman is now the chief strategy officer. At the hospital, he's like breaking down. They send him to the hospital. Send him to the hospital. They remove his kidney. He's back on the clock. 36 hours later. I think about that every morning as I'm taking my shots of B12.
Well, that won't kill you. All right, now we're going to escalate things. So everybody get to a slight stopping point, and then we'll move on. All right, now it's injects time. So if everything was hunky-dory, which if you're talking about things being fine, you're lying to yourselves, we're going to make it worse. So somebody grab a D6 on each team and roll, and these are your injects. So if you get a 1, Brian Krebs comes knocking, and Brian Krebs isn't going to leave until you give him information. So if you tell him thoughts and prayers like these guys are sending out on Twitter over here, it's not going to do you any good because he's not going to care. Loss of access, you can choose. Loss of employee. So this one's entertaining. You can have either your head in management resign, or as John and I were just discussing with your incident handler being hospitalized, like John's story was, one of the guys actually went down from drinking too much Monster and being up for 5 days in a row.
Yep.
Backup failure is always a nice, tasty one. Law enforcement subpoenas are competencies, so you could got lack of people or a delay in your actual MSSP response. Give everybody a minute. Take a minute and write this one down, then we're going to move on to the next question. All right, and then the next question is back to the management perspective. Now that you have an incident, now that you've actually had an impact to your strategy, what should your strategy be to actually contain? And why is this strategy actually preferable to anything else you could do? All right, I'm going to move through the back side of these questions a little faster. So, technical question 3, we got 2 more of these after this one. So, at this point, after everything that's happened, the injects have happened, what additional tools might you actually need to detect this scenario? So, based on the scenario you guys have created, based on the discussions you've already had, what do you think you might actually need to detect this in a better manner? Once again, you've got the percent dice. You can roll a percent die again. You could roll a D20 for something based on your discussion. Just choose based on your scenario what you want to do. Okay, we're going to speed this up a little bit. I'm going to move to the last management. Nope, that is the last question. So go ahead and we'll go another 5 to 7 minutes or so, and then we'll just do a quick wrap up. So Talk out all the weird, crazy stuff you can think up.
Okay. So I think we're going to kind of come back to the larger group now. Everybody's had some really great conversations, and as the fly on the wall, it's nice to be sit in and be the incompetent employee or the Brian Krebs. So just hearing the discussion. So this is kind of the idea of the tabletop, is to get all these, all the people in the room, and all the collective ideas documented. And it's like, oh wow, maybe the fact that we don't have all the skills necessary, or none of us are trained, is the biggest risk right now. And so that, that's clearly should be evident to the management team that's in the room, as well as, it's on a document somewhere that these were the results and the lessons learned, is that, we need more training. Maybe that's the next step. And so as bringing us back to the bigger group, and, as the now kind of the exercise facilitator, these are some questions, we call it a hot wash, that we maybe want to ask, regardless of the scenario. And I think we can do it as a larger group here. These are the type of questions you want to ask the participants. Are there any other issues besides what we talked about tonight that you would like to discuss that weren't raised? So maybe rephrased is, in your discussions about resolving the incident that you had, did you come up with something that was, an aha moment that we need to talk about? And maybe, okay. So I'll rephrase it one more time. Maybe in your own personal experience, is there something that, because of the exercise tonight, there's something at your organization that you could take back to your organization tomorrow and say, look, I learned this last night. Did we think about this? So, and this is something also to ask the participants, did you feel that this was beneficial? And theoretically, everybody in the room would be saying yes, right? Because you're learning, you're talking about risks that normally you wouldn't have in a day-to-day conversation. So, in thinking about doing this in kind of like a quarterly or annually, do you think this would help you prepare you to take back to your organization to do more testing? Okay. Okay, so go ahead.
So testing on your incident response plan is very important.
Okay. All right. So, okay, and I guess what did you gain personally from this exercise as a whole? And it's easy to be in management, and fix it. Don't interrupt my golf swing. So, golden parachute, exactly. So, well, that's a good point. Do we have golden parachutes in our employment agreements? So, so usually at the end of the exercise, you conduct a quick hot wash, lessons learned, and so the way we wanted, James and I wanted to do this tonight was, we actually have a survey we'd like you to take. It's 5 questions, and it's basically just taking a brief pulse of how well do we think, as again more the technicians, boots on the ground, how well our organizations or we personally feel we're trained to handle a cybersecurity incident. And so if you go to the link, and I'll bring it up here in just a second, just 5 basic questions. It'll say B-Sides tabletop feedback because it's the same link we used a couple weeks ago at B-Sides Iowa. But the idea is just to take a brief survey of boots on the ground and then actually come back and share those results at a future SEC DSM meeting or SEC IC, KC, Midwest, as well as we wanted to kind of reach out to Dr. Elena Mitchell and Pete Lundstedt over at Drake University. they're kind of interested in doing some studies and getting some research published, and so we want to just be able to take this back and at whatever event or con that we're at, just share that and just make that its own talk. So theoretically, by next month, that might be just a quick update we could do or future talk here. So I wanted to say thank you for participating. And James, do you have some final thoughts and comments?
No, just thank you as well. Hope everybody had fun. We had fun doing this at B-Sides. We had fun doing it tonight. Hopefully you guys got a lot out of it. I promise this is not a Tom Poll link when you click on it. There might be a question 6 on there, and feel free to click on that on your phone and then click on install. If you would, we'd appreciate it. No, not really. There's only 5 questions, quick and easy. Hopefully everybody had fun. Let us know if you have any feedback. As John and I said, this is a great basic exercise to do. We would love to step this up a notch and do some more detailed advanced ones in the future if everybody had fun and everybody wants to see that. Going with the D&D theme, we could definitely do a D&D style campaign with a technical one, which is kind of where I've thought this would be fun to take this in the future. So otherwise, we are done. So if you'd fill the survey out, we're good to go. Any other questions? Yeah, if somebody wants a set of die, feel free to do so. Otherwise, the bag's over here, and we'll take them back and use them for the next time. But if there's a set of die there and you don't have a D20 set of die and you'd like one, feel free to keep a set. That's it. Any other further questions? Otherwise, we're out of here. Nope. All right, thanks, guys. Hope you had fun. Good time.